Hello and welcome to the podcast series Academic Adventures with Dr. Harshit Agrawal. Join us as we uncover the authentic experiences of PhD scholars, one university at a time.
Today, I have with me Dr. Rohit Pandey. Rohit completed his undergraduate in mining engineering from Bengal Engineering and Science University, Shibpur, which is now known as Indian Institute of Engineering, Science and Technology. After completing his undergraduate, he moved to the UK to pursue his master's and PhD from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. After his PhD, he has worked with some of the major mining companies in the US, and now he is a full-time assistant professor at University of Virginia Tech. Welcome, Rohit, to this podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Harshit. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. So, to start this podcast, why don't you tell our listener about your journey? What intrigued you to do a PhD in the first place, or the entire journey from your undergraduate, or even if you want to start even before that, that's fine.
No, I think that's good because it's funny because I think for background, for people who are listening, Harshit and I first met at when we were undergrads at Ghatotand in West Bokaro, and then
Tata is an
uh,
internship.
we were both Tata interns, and I think at that point we were all excited because I think it was what we were in a third year, and then Tata internship was pretty coveted. And again, like personally, I grew up in Calcutta, so I grew up in a city, and then that was the first time I knew I was studying mining. But then again, like that, I had been to other internships. I went to Neyveli during my second year, and then third year we went to Tata, and then fourth year we went to Moyle.
Mm.
But the Tata internship was pretty good. However, uh, I think most mining engineers during that time would think, I mean, if you get a job or intern at Tata, that is probably the best mining job you can get. And then uh, although it was a good experience, like when I actually went there, I think that's the beauty. Ki mining mein, you get to do internships, which is actually not very common. I don't think so how it is right now. But if you, I we never came across people in other departments that had to go for summer internships or winter internships. So that is something that mining had very unique, and then that give the opportunity. Ki, okay, you go get an idea of how things are, so, although I think most of us from Ghatotand, I think we were what 20 interns and maybe only one
Yeah,
converted, the converted or one or two converted. So it was
one or
very
two
odd
converted.
that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the converted their internships into PPOs. But I think it was during that time I understood. Okay, you know what, like. Tata is the best that it gets, and then I don't know if I'm ready for like right after college I'm ready for a job or not, and so of course, in India, you take an entrance test, rank aata hai, and then you get mining, so you take mining. So uh,
Mining
that
chooses
is the
you rather
truth.
than you choosing mining.
But of course, like the university matters. So yeah, we were like, yeah, we want to go to good university. That was good because that does open up gates. So I think I'm giving you the long version of my story, right? So, but it is related to me and you because we both met in
Yeah, yeah.
during the Tata internship, and then I understood ki uh, Tata is good, but I don't think I'm ready for a job. I want to pursue higher studies, and uh, so, but I couldn't give my GRE right away because in my fourth year I didn't have my passport. So I had to wait a year because of some issues for documentation, like my passport. You need a passport to give GRE and TOEFL. So, but I had in the meantime I had given GATE, and then and I also had job offers from one consultancy, and then I also had a job offer from Vedanta. And then I did decent enough in GATE, so I also had an offer from IIT Kharagpur. So I think last day, I mean, my tickets to Goa, Sesa Goa was booked, and then last day I decided, you know what, I'm not going to go to Sesa Goa. I'll go to IIT Kharagpur, finish my GRE because I don't know once you start working how busy you will get. At least in an academic environment, you can keep studying. And then so the idea of going to grad school came after my internship with Tata Steel. Like I want to pursue that path. And then I was in Kharagpur for 1 year, and then in the meantime, I prepared for TOEFL and then GRE, although not very seriously, but at that point, I knew few people who have gone abroad, so I was in touch, and like things just worked out. So and then I came to grad school. So that is how it worked out.
Amazing. So, would you mind telling us a bit more about your application process? How did you approach your professor? Because obviously you came for a master, so the route would have been a bit different to, like if someone approaches a PhD, like professor to do their PhD. But if you can do a bit deep dive into, getting giving GRE and TOEFL and then getting the scores, but then what's the application process looks like and how did you approach? You basically, because you were applying for a master, so maybe it would be more like you just apply to the graduate school and you get admit, and but a bit more in detail, like what are the steps so that our listeners can learn from the journey, or like what
Uh,
the steps are.
in mining, actually, it is a little different. And
Okay.
then, uh, of course, like there are two parts to this answer. One part is like when I applied and when I came, and then what I think should be the strategy now. So when I came, it was different. I usually you will see people applying if you go through GRE and like all these grad school places, they'll be like, you have to look at your profile, look at your GRE score, look at your TOEFL score, look at your resume, and then apply to three ambitious school, three medium school, three safe schools, three very safe schools. So you send 12 applications. Mining, at least in the US, there are like 13 mining schools. So, and also, so the strategy is a little different. I personally did not, because I was already in contact with few seniors, and that's the good thing in India. In India, like when I was a student, I actually was pretty active, like through from like meeting students from other universities such as yourself, uh, internships, and then we used to have fests. So I kind of had a network, and like that time we made a Facebook group, so we like of Indian mining engineers. So like uh, I was able to reach out to a few people who were already here, people who I personally knew through my university, and then other people like from other like IIT, BHU, Kharagpur, and then I actually talked with them. So, but what ended up happening was I went to Kharagpur, and then one of my senior, Vivek Singh, he was already at SIU, and then he knew that I am interested. So, and he was working with Dr. Harpalani, and he said, "Hey, there is a position that's going to open up. Are you interested to apply?" I was in Kharagpur. I sent an email. I hadn't prepared. Once you, I was planning on giving my TOEFL GRE, but there was no drive. Like once Vivek said that, hey, Harpalani is probably going to hire, send him an email. So I sent him an email, and then we talked, and then this was somewhere around the end of the year, and then actually Dr. Harpalani, my advisor, he came over and he interviewed me. I still hadn't. That was in December. I still hadn't given my TOEFL or GRE then. So after that, I gave my TOEFL and GRE. Like he conditionally said that, hey, like yeah, I will give you an offer. But so this is very unique.
Yeah.
But it is not very unique for, and I'll tell you why. So I only applied to one school. I know where I was coming. I know like I had funding, and that is something that's unique in mining. Like if you talk to electrical computer engineers, masters, no one gets funding. Well, you might get funding if you're good, but in mining, it is odd for, at least in the US. I don't know how it's in the UK. So
Yeah.
it's odd for students to come here without funding. So people do come here without funding, and actually, uh, if I were to take a student, a PhD is like a 4 year commitment. Sometimes I would prefer to take a master student, see how they perform, and then take a longer time commitment with those students. Um, so I think the trick here is, uh, if you are interested, reach out, and then also, of course, there is another aspect of reaching out to professors. Like it will be unlikely that you would know someone who can guide you through the process, like it was my case. But the the other aspect is, if you're in mining, you will know someone somewhere, so you can, and if you reach out to that person, they're more than likely to at least guide you the right way. So I think we shouldn't be shy about reaching out to people, especially if you know they're mining engineers and they have followed a path that you have taken. I This is not very direct advice, but it highlights the fact that mining graduate school works slightly differently than other graduate programs which are more standardized.
Right. Yeah, and obviously, like mining is a bit cohesive, or you can say like a shorter or a stronger community in a sense, because there aren't too many mining engineers across the world. So maybe you would know someone who would know someone somewhere, right? So that makes sense. But then if we talk a bit, say a bit more broadly about those who are applying to the states for their masters or say for their PhD. So what would be a typical route for them? Like just apply for, let's just focus on PhD, because now since you are a professor, so you would be getting a lot of emails from prospective students, right? So what is the process now for a PhD application in the US?
Again, like I will club both masters and PhD together because
Okay.
and I'll explain to you why. But I think the process pretty much is then nothing will happen unless you apply. So even I can write 100 emails to a professor, but at the end of the day, if I don't apply through the grad school website, you will not get admitted, right? So so you have to be ready to apply. And usually after COVID, most universities have removed the standardized test requirement, at least in the US. I know like a couple of universities still require GRE, but GRE is optional. So you don't need GRE. So
Okay.
that's good. So all you need is English certification. That's either TOEFL or IELTS. I know Duolingo also has some universities accept some Duolingo tests. But all
Okay.
you need to do is you need to show proficiency in English, which is, and then you don't need GRE. So then what you need for application is you need like 2-3 letters of references, a personal statement, your resume, and then you have to apply. Now that is the path you have to do. Like no matter what anything else that you do, you will have to apply. The other aspect is you have to reach out. Like now maybe if you are a third, fourth year student, then you probably don't know what you're interested in. So then you might be sending out more general emails, or if you are already working in a company, you're 2-3 years in, and then you're like, okay, like I've had some experience and now I know what I want to do. So then you find professors who are in that field, ki, chalo, rock mechanics or ventilation, or you're interested in stochastic planning, optimization, or environment. Then you find professors who in those universities who are working in this area. You send them an email with your attach a resume, tell them that you're interested, why you're interested, and sometimes professors will have funding, sometimes they will not. But and maybe 80% of the cases you will not hear back from them, and of the 20% of the cases, 80% of that they will say no, but there's always a chance that they will say yes. Or if you have a good profile and this professor doesn't have funding at that point, their funding might come in a year or two later. So, I mean, you can always follow up every 5-6 months, or it really depends. But I think the point is, for mining, if you know what you want, reach out to the professors who are in the field, and either they will say no or they will not respond, but they might also say yes. Then you can target that particular school through the grad school application. Otherwise, if you think you have a strong profile, and strong profile means your GPA is good, you have not failed a lot of classes in undergrad, you have cleared your TOEFL, you have strong reference letters, then you should just apply. And because universities will still go through the hiring process and then give admits to certain students without the guarantee of funding. Now, if you have gone through the process that you have been officially admitted, then then at that point maybe a professor doesn't have funding, but the professor would know that these 5 students out of the 30 applicants have been admitted. So 6 months later, if I get funding, I can always go back to that pool and see, okay, like, is there someone who's interest, like who matches, who might be a good fit for my team. So I think even if you don't get proper response from professors, if you think your profile is good, you should still apply if you're
Okay.
serious about it.
Okay. So then essentially if you apply to the pool, and then if you get an admit, so you have to like pay the fees by yourself to come the grad school, right? And then
Yes.
as and when the opportunity arises with the professor, if they have funding, then they may hire you on a funded part, but otherwise you have to pay by yourself.
So again, like it depends, different universities do it differently. Just because you get admit doesn't mean you have to attend.
Okay.
And admit means
You
if
can
you attend,
defer.
you have to pay fees. You
Okay.
and then you can defer it. You can reach out to other professors and say that, hey, I have an admit, but admit means you're good enough to attend. You pass all the
Very
required
much.
criteria to attend. But people have to be able to fund your education, so there should be projects for that. Now maybe a year and a half later some project arises, and then at that time I might not have good candidates in my pool, so I might still go back, like as a professor I might still go back and look through who has been admitted. And if someone has emailed me like 6 months ago, I might reach back to out to them. So I mean, my a few of my own students that happened, right? They didn't. I mean, when they reached out, I didn't have funds, and then when I had funds, I looked through the applicants, and then it happened, right? So, and oftentimes once you apply, at least I know at least at Virginia Tech, if you get accepted and then you can't come in that year, they can always, and then your application gets. I'm not very. I'm still relatively new to the university, so I'm not terribly aware of all the processes, but they can always revive your application because once you're admitted, you're good enough. So then you don't have
Yeah.
to, maybe you have to pay fees or something like application fee or
Mhm.
something like that. But for the most part, it works out.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. And then talking about SIU Carbondale, you obviously mentioned like you were guided by your senior that this is a good university, and Dr. Halparani, who is already very famous, so he is looking for to hire a PhD or a master's student. But then, what were the other universities that you were targeting
Uh,
in the US?
at that point, I was not targeting because I went with a target to Kharagpur to apply, and then I started having fun. So and then
Okay.
and then within like 5-6 months, like I was in conversation with Vivek.
Mhm.
So within 5-6 months, I heard from him. So like things kind of, I spent at least one full semester not knowing what's going to happen. After that first semester ended, I knew that okay, like I'm going down this path because, and so I didn't have to think too much. Like it just worked out. But
Okay.
I think again, like the more useful answer to that is. Um, there are 13 universities, right? And most universities will, I mean, they do have a grad program. So, I mean, if you are a student, uh, University of course, Virginia Tech, you have University of Arizona, Kentucky, uh, Colorado School of Mines, Penn State, Michigan Tech. So, South Dakota School of Mines, all of these always have some opening or the other. University of Alaska, that has always had a lot of Indian students go there. Um, So there are 13 universities, and like if you're applying, you might as well plan on applying to all 13, right? So you don't have to if you know like which ones you will apply to. Usually in the US there are like research grades, like the Carnegie classification. You have like R1 schools, R2 schools. So R1 is like very high research. So in R1 schools you have Virginia Tech, CSM, Kentucky, Arizona. I don't know if Nevada Reno is R1 or R2. And then you have like other R2 schools which have like lower research activity. So in R1 schools, they are always, I mean, we can't do research with the grad students. So we are always looking for grad students because our job is mostly research and we do a little bit of teaching. So
Okay.
I mean, if anyone goes online and looks for R1 schools, so if you want to do research that's funded, you want to target those R1 schools first. But also sometimes you would in mining, because the community is small, even R2 schools have projects, so you have to apply to
Mhm.
those schools as well.
Okay.
So that is how it is.
Okay. And then, as you mentioned, like people generally target like super premium school, then or like whatever the safe school or very safe school. So is it more like based on your own background? You look for okay, this is very ambitious or this is within reach, and these are like easy to get in. What's that rationale? And if you can explore a bit more on it.
So I would say like at least if you are applying for an R1 school where we are expected to do a lot of research, like research is pretty much you have to like depending, you might do experiment simulation, but you eventually have to write papers, you have to publish, you have to have that bend of mind. Like now, in your the way you understand is if you're applying for a PhD, and the kind of applicants I see right now, if you don't have any research experience, you will not get admitted for PhD. But if you have good, uh, maybe if you have decent GPA and if you have had a good industry experience, you've worked for a few years or you have done something towards that, then you might be able to get into a master's program because that says that like at least this individual has worked constructively towards something. Now, whether or that not that person can do research is we don't know that yet. But a master's is a shorter time commitment. Like we can understand, and like if that student shows potential, that is good. But also one thing that is useful is letter of recommendation. So whenever you fall in that category, then that's where you we read through LORs to see what other people have to say. Now, and like you can tell which is an honest LOR and which is not an honest LOR. So so if a professor has honestly written his or her opinion about the candidate, like, and we can always pick up the phone and talk, right? So and I've done that also. So uh, from understanding what is safe and unsafe schools, if you're applying to research heavy universities for a PhD, if you don't have any prior research experience, it can also be a conference paper. No one expects you to write um, a quartile one journal article, like, but if you have some research experience, worked in labs, uh, even in the summer, like if you have not done an internship but worked with a professor in the lab to do some kind of simulation, things like that. So those kind of are pointers that, hey, like you have a better chance. But if your grades are poor, if you're like second division, if you've failed a bunch of classes and you have not done, like, your internships were not like stellar, so then it becomes difficult to get an admit. However, sometimes we need students, right? So that's where if you think that until your college time you have not done well, then after your college time you can improve on your work, right? And then you might spend that 1-2 year in preparation to apply, and then you might get into a university that is not very research heavy. But if you want to do a PhD in research heavy university, either you have a master's or you have some research experience during a bachelor's, or you have extremely good grades. Like if you have like really good grades, then your chances increase.
Okay. And then, because we are talking a bit focused on mining, I would also like to know the future in this field, essentially. And the reason for me asking is because, like the coal mining is getting shut down everywhere, right? And because of the climate change and everything. And then there is a huge impetus on the renewables. But then again, getting all these licensing and everything done, it's a long process. And I was reading something very recently which says like US is especially suffering a lot from a lack of mining engineers. And it is also foreseeable in the future that there would be lack of mining engineers. So for someone who is planning to do a long commitment of say 4 or 5 years to do their master's or PhD, what does the future looks like?
I mean, on paper, there will be jobs. Like the job growth is expected to follow the US labor trend of like slightly increasing, like following the average US job growth expectations. But that is the number of jobs that will open up. But there is already a deficit in the number of engineers. I'll just give you an example. At Virginia Tech, which is like one of the premier mining schools, last year we have our own mining campusing, right? Only, and here campusing is a little different than in India. In India, usually have 1-2 companies come in a day. Here, there's a career fair. All the companies come, they set up stall, and then students walk around, talk with them, interview them. We had more companies than we had number of students looking for a job. So
Okay.
yeah, so now everyone's experience is different, but the likelihood of you getting a job right now is high. But you also have to do some things right? So your expectations of what you have to do in the job has to be correct. Like if you have some prior internship or mining experience, that would definitely help you get a job. But if you have a degree from a mining degree and you have a mining background, you will likely get a job. Now, what's going to happen in 5 years? I think this trend will continue. Now, you mentioned coal. Mining is a commodity-based industry, but the good thing is like it's multiple commodities. So
Yeah.
at the end of the day, I mean, you're learning the basics of engineering,
Yeah,
right?
the science. Yeah.
So I mean, if the if today gold market goes down and you lose a job, then maybe the Trona market opens up. So there'll be openings over there. So um, all industries goes through cycles, but overall, um, I have not seen it, it sometimes it might take longer to get a job, but overall, from where I stand right now, what my perspective is, and being in the industry, there, if you do the basic things correctly, you will get a job.
And then if I quickly talk again a bit specific to mining, and the reason for me asking is because after their undergraduate, many people go into the industry, right? So they maybe lose a bit of their academic side of things, right? So how easy or difficult it is for them to then start to pursue a master's or a PhD? And
Uh,
is that mining experience, field experience, considered valuable during their post study, like postgraduate study?
I mean, the field experience is life experience. So yes, because then that person becomes more independent. So for a master's, definitely yes, because then I know if someone spent 2 3 years working in the field,
Mm,
I can ask them to do something. Then it'll be more than likely they'll get it done because that is what the real job
yes,
teaches you, right?
yeah.
So masters, I think you would have a good opportunity again. Like if you target tier 1 schools for research, then a little bit of research helps. But then again, like what you have done in the field also matters, right? So if you have developed a product, if you have improved processes, how you write your statement and
Mm,
relate to the future work, it matters. Now, if all you have done is like you have been assigned a mine that you go underground once in 6 months just because DGMS is visiting, and then you
yeah,
have not really done anything, and then uh, and maybe you might put in your resume that you have done a lot of things, but once I talk to you, we can get an idea of what you have done, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
any experience is good experience, right? Because one thing about mining research is the there is some depth to the research, but it is from one perspective is not as competitive as like molecular biology or any physics or chemistry, where the requirement, the precision of outcome is very high, right? So I mean, we still work with laws of averages. So oftentimes it is I mean, although with big data and like more automation, some of these core, I mean, if you have some of these core training with modern computing technologies, that might help. But
Mhm.
understanding of a mining situation is helpful if you're trying to understand, like, and then if you don't have quote unquote academic background in your undergrad, I don't think so that is a big problem. But if you want to apply for a PhD, I would be a little more relieved if you have some idea of how research is done.
Right. That makes a lot of sense, Rohit. And now, before I jump on your current role, I just want to know during your PhD journey, what was obviously we all go through ups and downs in our PhD journey. So, what was the most challenging part for your PhD, and how did you overcome that?
I think PhD was not very challenging. I came from a master's, so after master's, my target was to go through like, okay, like I wanted to slightly my research was a little away from mining. We were working with flow of flow in porous media, so like reservoir characterization in natural gas. At that point, coal bed methane type application. So I wanted to go into that field in which a lot of the research is not done by mining schools. They are done by actually pretty big schools, like Texas, Austin, Stanford. So my idea was that I want to target a R1 school, Ivy League type school, like top 10 school, and then I had publications in the process after my master's. I also started looking for jobs, but that time the either I was not looking for jobs the right way, and also looking for jobs, I was not looking for mining jobs. I was looking for more reservoir jobs, and then I realized, I'm a mining engineer. it was hard for me to get even a interview call. So, but on the other hand, like that was the year when oil prices hit $30 a barrel. So there was the market, even grad school market was pretty saturated from people who were dropping out of industry, going into oil and gas type research. So I applied to, so I didn't apply to a bunch of schools from India, but after I came to the US, I applied to like 8 schools to get into PhD.
Okay.
And then it was Stanford, UT Austin, Oklahoma. I only got into Penn State. And then at Penn State, they were like first. I had a roommate Akshat. Both of us actually, both of us applied to all these schools, and we only got into Penn State. And I think Akshat also had, maybe he got into Oklahoma, but I think it didn't work out. So, but they wanted us to pay fees for the first semester or two, and then after that, they were not committing funds right away. So I'm like, yeah, this is not gonna work. But Akshat took the plunge and like he kind of committed some funds. But after he went, within the first semester, he got funding and like then everything was smooth. It was not possible for me. So that period was a little challenging. And then I realized, मैं हूँ mining engineer. So at the end of the day, I'm a mining engineer. Why am I trying different things? So it was at that point my professor also. I've also got a project. And then he said, and I was looking for jobs elsewhere. I had finished graduate, I had moved out of Carbondale, and I was looking for jobs, staying with friends. And then he's like, you know what, I have a project, and he knew that I had an admit at Penn State. I wanted to go to a bigger school. He's like, if you want to come. And then if you want to leave after a year because you have deferred your application at Penn State, if the professors there have funding in that time, you can leave. And at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to come back to SIU, start my PhD. But the good thing was I already knew everything. The labs were not new to me. And then I talked to a couple of professors in Penn State, and like one of them gave me good. I mean, he was like, you're already working with a great professor. You're in a smaller university, but coming to a bigger university, you're just going to take more classes. You're going to get adjusted in a different system. The time it will take for you to publish papers will be longer. So you're better off just staying at SIU. I finished my coursework pretty quickly. My research was actually done in less than 2 years, because 2.5 years, but then I continued. That gave me time to write papers, because all the experimental processes I knew, like there was nothing. We still did new things, but that bottlenecking of learning a completely new system was not there. All the softwares I knew, it was just easy.
Right.
So
the data acquisition challenges were not there, right?
Yes. We
So
ran
you
into
can,
experimental problems. Yeah.
yeah.
Then SIU doesn't have a mining program anymore because they closed down. But at that point, so there were 13 schools. SIU closed down, but then after SIU closed down, Michigan Tech opened up the mining program. So there are still 13 schools. So mining engineers can't apply to SIU anymore, but there are other programs. At that point, I realized, hey, I want to stay in mining, because this natural gas thing will not work out, and oil and gas is two commodities, oil and gas. If the oil prices drop, then the gas prices drop. If both of them drop, you are out of a job. But in mining, you have more commodities. So like the common sense came to me then, and after that it was rather smooth, because then I told my professor I want to teach, because I knew if that's the path I want to go down. So I started teaching. I taught a bunch of classes at SIU. I was also doing research. So the challenging part was the transition after master's to PhD, and part of that was my own naivety, thinking I don't want to be in mining. But once I decided that I want to be in mining, and I started teaching mining classes to like kind of build up my resume. I always wanted to be in academia, but then I started, after my PhD, I got jobs. Like the interviews were more because I was applying for mining jobs. I was from a mining school. But I realized I won't become a professor right away, because my research is not in mining. I do flow in porous media research. And I taught classes, but I have some internships. But I had published enough papers to get interview calls, but then I
Mhm.
realized they will just I don't have enough mining background for a big mining school to take me. So that's why I then moved to industry to uh, to learn about the industry. I mean, you can't really with degrees you can't learn. At least in
The actual
mining,
mining. Yeah.
it's not going to happen. So that is that was not challenging because I had options. I had other jobs, I had research type jobs, I had industry type jobs. I didn't have an academic job, like professor job, I didn't have. But I had jobs, so I was not stressed out. But after my master's, that was the hardest part. But once I decided, ki, nahi, I have to do mining, and the good thing was I was in the same school with a good advisor, with all the
Mhm.
resources that I needed to do research. It was easy,
Right.
relatively.
Right. Okay. So that brings me to my next question, which is essentially, like you have touched upon it a bit in brief. So essentially, like first being in mining, then moving to oil and gas, or say the porous media thing that you were doing, and then again going back to industry, right? How would you say that helped you in your position at Virginia Tech now? And how, like what kind of expertise and difference you bring to the table as compared to, someone who just have an academic background and is becoming a professor, say, suppose at Virginia Tech or somewhere, anywhere else, because you must have something unique, some unique experience because of
Yeah,
your field work.
I mean, if there are like 13 schools, like I said, maybe there are like 70,
Hmm.
80 professors. So
Hmm.
those professors have their jobs for life for the most part.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
every year you have like 2, 3 positions open up. You're graduating hundreds of mining engineers every year.
Hmm.
So and those mining engineers actually go to the industry to do a job. So I mean, the moment you have some industry experience, you can relate well to them. But
Hmm.
more importantly, at least in the US, have the same culture in India, like they do internships, and they're a little more serious. In India, you can get away with not doing anything during your internships, but here people are actually serious about the internships. So by the time you're teaching a third, fourth year class, if you've not been in that situation, like the students have more practical knowledge. So just being able to give examples of what the application of Bernoulli's equation or pillar design in field is going to be in a nomenclature that the students will actually be able to apply, or when they go to a site, they will understand what they are looking at. That is definitely helpful. The students find value in that.
Right. Right. Obviously, your practical experience from the field adds up to what you are teaching to them.
Yeah, because when I'm teaching something, I can say, you know what? Uh, I'll give an example.
Hmm.
Size of a regulator. You're like, okay, using this equation, you calculated the size of a regulator as 40 square feet or 25 square feet. How are you going to tell the foreman about that? Like you can't tell 25 square feet, but you're better off telling them 5 feet by 5 feet, like
Right.
so that they're not doing multiplication, division. It's not like that incapable of it, but if you give them like the
It will be
how you would
faster and easier.
and then less chances of errors, right? You're more specific. So
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you conduct yourself uh, as you transition your technical understanding to the practical execution? Uh, that is definitely helpful.
Right. Right. And then talking a bit more of your PhD, of your assistant professor experience now, and like you must be receiving a lot of emails from students who want to do a PhD or a master's under your guidance. So how is it that you select a student, and like is it their SOP, is it their LOR, or how do you select that if a candidate is good or not?
First thing is I read the email and see how they've written it. If it reads like a mass email, then I don't. I mean, there is no value in it. And then, but usually I think with all the resources available online, people have started doing that. I don't see a lot of students just sending out mass emails. Maybe previously professors saw that. That is the instruction we received when we were applying to grad school. Don't send mass emails.
Mhm.
But I think students are a little more informed these days. Um, so the second thing is I look at his resume, like what have they
Mhm.
done? What kind of are they working? Like what stage are they in? Are they in school? What kind of grades do they have? What are their interests, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
now, and has the student taken time to draft the email from a perspective to at least talk about what I do, like not in what I do, like my group has my work has a focus area. Like now, if someone talks about extractive metallurgy and wants to do a PhD with me, like then that is not worthwhile. At least there has to be they have to be knowledgeable, at least in the area that I'm working in. Um, so I think is the resume properly formatted? Like, did you just put anything together like in 5 minutes and send it to me, or like did you actually uh, take the effort in formatting things properly? Full stop, period here and there, one space here and there, typo is fine. You will have typos, but you can tell a well drafted, like where you have taken the time and effort. That I might be right or wrong. It might be the right strategy or wrong strategy. I don't know, but at least to me, it tells that you have taken the um, uh, effort in being
Making your
serious
resume.
about this pursuit. So that's there, of course. So again, what you've put in your resume, your GPA. The first email is always that you put in your interest, how it matches with my interest, your resume, which contains your GPA and your experience. Now, if I uh, now, of course, like at Virginia Tech, we get applicants from all around the world. So sometimes it is hard for me to judge like uh, uh, the quality of the university that they're going to. So, I mean, again, right or wrong, you would have great students from average and poor universities. You would have poor students from great universities. It is usually never, but the law of average all like works on average of the situation. So if I just use that is a first filter, but I don't limit myself to that, because now, okay, if I know that you're not from the best university, then I look, okay, like what other things that you have done to improve on your skill set. If I see added effort, like, okay, you have gone and worked with this person and you have an experience of working on on rock science software, which was not required, but you did a project based on that and you submitted a technical report, like which you didn't need to do. So those kind of things we keep an eye out for. And then I think everything comes down to what if I also, if you have taken your TOEFL, if you have taken your GRE, if you have taken your JRL, at least look at your score. Uh, uh, but if you have taken TOEFL and how are you drafting your written material? Is it legible English? And then if I like the student, I'll set up a phone call or Zoom call and then actually have a conversation to understand what their interests are, tell them what my expectation is, see how they communicate, things like that.
Okay. That's nice. Nice to hear. And obviously, like mass emails don't work, and don't send an email with a completely different background to a professor who doesn't work or even is remotely associated, which makes all sense. And then talking again from a bit more from the student's perspective, say if a student is genuinely interested, so what would be the key points that they can highlight in their SOPs or resumes which will gauge more interest from a professor and give them a better chance of getting hired or getting an interview call?
Um, I think the level of research now, suppose if I am applying to if I am a student and applying to, suppose not me, but to a more uh, 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 a more experienced professor, if you cite their work from 1980 and talk about that work and why that interests you, the chances of like, whereas if literature is available on the current work that they're doing and the types of problems that they're solving, and then you draft your email with that focus, that at least says that, hey, like you didn't just search that person's name first thing that came on the internet. You actually went through the process of reading through what they have done, because what a professor would have done in 1980 or 90, is the techniques are probably obsolete by now, so then why are you talking about it? So those are the kind of things that works. Again, like in the first email, you're not going to write 2 paragraphs or 10 paragraphs, maybe 2 short paragraphs, and then hope. And then if the student has the skill set, if they're working in, for me, if they're working in an experimental lab doing characterization such as XRD, BET, you know what porosity permeability is, work with tight rocks, pressurized systems. So if they have worked in a similar capacity or have some experience of similar capacity elsewhere, then I know once they work with me, the learning, the pace at which they have to learn would be quicker because they already know these basic characterization tools. But not everyone will have that. But if you have that, I have had few students who have the exact experience that I would need. At that point, that would definitely, like, okay, I might have to, like, interview that candidate. And then actually I did not offer that candidate because after the interview it didn't work out. So so yeah, like it is always to show that you have done your homework by including relevant details. Now again, like, this is a very general answer, but you can't just send me a message in LinkedIn saying, hello, I'm applying, I'm thinking about grad school, can you help me with the process? No, like, I mean, that is not, there's nothing wrong in reaching out like that, but usually it's not worth my time to do your research for you. But if I see a message in LinkedIn that, hey, this is who I am, I came across information here, like, this seems very interesting, I have interest and maybe some relevant background, at that point, even a LinkedIn message is fine. But if you send me an email or a LinkedIn, and believe me, people do that. Like, I have a LinkedIn message the other day. Hello, I am a mechanical engineer. I want to work on heat flow. Can you guide me through the process? I am not a mechanical engineer. I don't work on heat flow. Like, you can't just randomly search people. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. And then you did mention about the research paper. So is it only for, say, urban universities, or is it must, especially if someone is looking for a PhD? I understand, like, if it won't be that important if you are looking for a master's degree, because not everyone gets a research paper out of their undergraduate studies anyway. But is it 100% must to get into any good universities in the US to have a research paper of you?
It is not 100% must. It
Okay.
helps, but it is not 100% must.
Okay. So suppose if someone is looking for a PhD degree, right, and they don't have a research paper, right, then how would you understand that they have this research bent of mind that they would be able to complete a PhD research?
You never know. Like, at a certain point, you're always taking some amount of gamble, right? So of course, like, they have gone through the technical training, and then that should be reflected in their transcript, in the kind of GPA and the letter of recommendation. So, and then you talk to them, ask them like basic questions. Like, for me, if I'm experimental, I'll ask them, okay, like, are you okay working, getting drenched in oil, getting dirty, uh, and like, sometimes working long hours, sometimes working short hours. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to research is not bent of mind. It is all about, are you willing to do what it takes? So, I mean, you don't have to be smart to do PhD. You have to make sure that no matter what, like, you're going to see through the task at hand, because that is how you solve problems. So now, if you don't have, uh, if you are impatient and things like that, then it is a problem. But if like, you might, I don't know what I'm working on right now. I honestly don't. Like, I have research process. I have no idea that what it really is. And maybe no one has the idea. And that is the point of research. Like, if you already have the idea, why would you be doing research, right? So it is just about being patient. And you might think that you're the best student, they come here and they're not, right? So there are some guidelines, and then it comes down to the grind. And then some of the students would be good, some of the students would be average, some of the students would be bad. So I can't be sure.
Right. Okay. And then a quick question again from more of a student perspective. So, ChatGPT, GenAI, Copilot, everything is now very easy for anyone to reach out to. So, does that make a difference if a student is heavily relying on some of these ChatGPT kind of technology to write their SOPs or CV or cover letter? And because again, if you talk about their own writing or communication capabilities, it may severely be different, right? So someone can write a very good and a very, say, a very to the mark, very perfectly written, perfectly structured SOP, if using ChatGPT or GenAI, but then in practical they may not have that good communication strategy. So does that make it a bit challenging?
Written skills and uh, verbal communication skills are different skill sets. So,
Yeah.
uh, if a student has the brain to use ChatGPT, because ChatGPT can I mean, doesn't always make sense. So, is the
Yeah.
student just copying pasting ChatGPT or actually doing prompt engineering to like engineer the response to make like to guide it in a way that the content itself makes sense? So I'm okay with that. But
Okay.
if a student is just using ChatGPT and not reading what it's producing, like then I mean it is a no-brainer. But if a student, I mean, I don't know, like if a student from India whose English is not the best, but he can still write and he's using the skill techniques,
To
technology.
polish
I
it.
don't have, yeah, I don't have a problem with that. But that's where you talk to them and then you realize, okay, like his verbal communication skills are worse than their written communication skills, or their verbal communication skills are better than the written communication skills. So then now if a student has written everything and then can't even talk, then that's a problem.
Right. Okay. And then talking a bit more about scholarships, I know like you had a bit different route for your master's or PhD, but then what are there any scholarships available in general? Because obviously the cost of education in the US is a bit high, and not everyone can afford it. So are there any scholarships that a student can target or apply when they are trying to reach out to any grad school?
My route was different, but my mechanism was still the same. So
Okay.
at the end of the day, at least in the US, uh, for the most part, uh, you you apply to grad school. Now, depending on how good you are or how well you fit with the work of a professor,
Hmm.
some universities will have TAs that like okay, we would uh, or departments will be like, okay, we teach few classes and we need teaching assistants for that. So they'll have set TA funding. And if you're very good and then a professor doesn't have funds, then some departments might consider bringing you over, not for a research appointment to begin with. You would still have an advisor, but you would be paid for your teaching work. Like, so, but in the other cases, which is most likely the case, a professor is you're working with a professor, you're doing work for the professor to answer research challenges, and then that gets picked up by a project, right? A
Okay.
project that they might have. So the mechanism that I followed was still the same, although my route was a little more direct because
Yeah.
that was because I had information. So it was pointless for me to do the extra work that everyone does because of the lack of information. Once you have
Yeah.
directed information, you follow the same mechanism. So
Okay.
now I know some other countries, they will have like Erasmus Mundus or DAD, so centralized or even Fulbright scholars. Um, I I have seen some Fulbright scholars come from other countries. I have, at least in mining, but Indians or like even now you might get some funding from DST or Department of Science and Technology, or you might find something from the government, but usually the mechanism is you apply to the grad school, you get
Hmm.
admitted to the department. If a professor has funding, you either they will reach out to you, but more likely you reach out to them, show interest. If there is position, they will interview you. If they like you, they will offer you and they'll pick your. So a scholarship is usually in mining, your tuition is waived, you don't have to pay any tuition fees, and you will get a monthly stipend that usually covers your living expenses.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. And then, do you also have this structure of having a doctoral advisory committee or, like some sort of support to the student during their entire journey, PhD journey in the US?
So, of course, like there are different steps to that you have to finish as you work towards the PhD.
Hmm.
Every university does it different. At Virginia Tech, within the first year, you have to take like a qualifying exam in which, like, in our department, they do a deep critique of a paper and then defend it in front of three other committee members, in which I am not present, like the advisor is not present, and they will judge whether or not you have the necessary skill set uh, to be even considered for a PhD. If you fail in that exam, you get another chance. If you fail in that, I think you have the option to take a master's and leave. So that is over there. You're judging if the student can read a paper, understand scientific literature. So that is just yeah. That is where you um, you might have the best resume, but if you can't understand what the paper is saying and point out its defects, then you can't really do a PhD. Now, is it the best way? I don't know, but that is a process. And it's a check-in place. After that, uh, the student will have a core committee member in which the advisor will be there, and then you'll have, for a PhD here, we have 3 more or 4 more. And then they have some related expertise. Of course, by the end of the PhD, you are the expert in that area, but you will have people like in my committee, I had someone in hydrology who was an expert in groundwater flow, but although we were not doing groundwater flow, there's related expertise. So, and then you defend your proposal, like whatever you would have done some preliminary work, you propose a hypothesis that you want to go after, you defend that, they will give you suggestions saying that no, what you're saying doesn't make sense, or it makes sense, you make these adjustments, and then you take that guidance, and then finally you do the work and then defend the work in front of the committee. They will depending on the extent of the work that you have done, they will approve it or ask you to make some changes. But in the entire process, you are always communicating with your advisor, right? I mean, now some advisor are a little more hands-on, some advisor will be like, you figure it out, some advisor will be, you have weekly meetings, someone will have monthly meetings, that and you have to show progress. It really depends on the type of work. But if you, and I mean, again, like people have told me that, oh, during the PhD, they received minimal input. Every time they went to the advisor with a problem, they were like, like it's your PhD, you figure it out. No matter which route it takes, it gives you a different learning. If the advisor is hands-on, then you would know the right way to do things. If the advisor is hands-off, then you would learn how to figure things out, by yourself. So a good mix of both is good. So that is the kind of, this structure means you'll have a qualifying, you'll have a proposal, you have a final defense in which there are inputs from other committee members. But that is like 3 meetings in 5 years, right? 3 set meetings in 4 or 5 years. So, but on a more regular basis, you'll be interacting with your group mates, your supervisors. You would take courses that you feel is relevant to your work. You can ask the inputs from those professors. If they can provide input, you can reach out to other experts. As you mature as a grad student, you will probably reach out to some other professor in some other university because you're trying to replicate some of their technique and it doesn't work. So you can ask for input. So yeah, that is how it should work. It should, yeah.
Okay, cool. And that's a good point of advice there. And then say again towards the close now, what would be your 2 cents for someone who is looking to do a PhD or a master's from, say, the United States, like irrespective of the universities, but what would be your 2 cents to them?
I think in the basic level, the basic engineering knowledge is important. Like if so, don't just ignore everything that is being taught in undergrad. Now, you might not have any interest in environment, right? So you might have scored a 16 in environmental class, but you might have scored a 90 in rock mechanics. So or vice versa. So have some interest in the pathway, and the sooner you know, better it is. And that if your GPA reflects that, it is always good. Try to find ways in which you can associate yourself with some of the research that, at least in mining in India, I mean, if it's Shibpur, Kharagpur, Rourkela, Dhanbad, professors are doing some kind of research. Try to associate with them. They will give you good guidance. Even if you don't have a paper, at least that recommendation, the skill sets, software, maybe experimental, maybe learning how to do literature review, you might be able to learn from them. So I think if you want to do a grad school, the best thing you can do is work with a professor in your university through regular university time, like semesters, and get exposure to research. All major mining universities in India do research to a certain extent, um, and then that would be the most sure shot way of having the best chances of getting to grad school. Because once it comes to that, you apply within the deadline. You have your letter of recommendation, statement of purpose. Most schools don't need GRE. You have your TOEFL, but if you have that prior research exposure, that will go a long way. Now, if you have failed in all your free classes, the likelihood is limited. So GPA does matter a little bit, and then reach out to professors. If you know what area you want to apply to, reach out to professors who are doing similar work. If you're not very sure, still reach out to professors whose work you find interesting, and say that, like, this is of interest to me, although I've not worked in this, but I am a motivated student. I'm willing to learn, go the extra mile, and if there's any opportunities, I would be more than happy. And here's my resume. I've done well in similar courses, and I plan on applying to grad school. So I think that is more or less, uh, if you follow that template, that would help out. Now, if you don't have any research activity, uh, your internships, what you've learned in the internships, try to relate to that. Do a small project. In fourth year, everyone does some kind of project, so like try to relate to that. So there is always a need. The need might not be exactly when you're looking for it, but the sooner you start investigating the process, the better you would know, and your chances will increase.
That's a very valid and very to the point piece of advice, Rohit. So thank you very much. And thank you very much for your time today. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Arshit.
Thanks for joining us. That's a wrap on Academic Adventures with Dr. Harshit Agrawal. Comment your thoughts and subscribe to my channel for more inspiring stories. Please share this podcast with your friends and fellow enthusiasts. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep growing.